Good afternoon, everyone. Buongiorno, Milano, grazie di tutto. It's wonderful to be here this afternoon. My name is Jebb. I'm the managing editor of the art newspaper. And I'm honored to be here today with my colleagues Bettina Kames, Susanna Barla, Christiansen, and Beatriz Colomina. And we're going to be looking at the intersection between art technology and biodiversity, facing reality that species extinction is a real challenge today. And that relationship is, as I think we're going to show, multivalent. It goes in every direction. And what I'm going to ask my colleagues to do is they're going to introduce each other themselves briefly, and then we'll come to the first question. So, Susanna, would you like to go first?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. I'm an alien. No, I'm not. But I started my career in high fashion in Martin Margiela, and I think it's important to note, because I realized by working in the art world that how much that I've learned in fashion can be integrated when it comes to communication, marketing, and creating interest for very serious topics like climate change. But I've delved into venture capital, climate tech investing, and now arts technology, because I think my strong belief is we need cultural change in order to save ourselves from extinction. And I'm extremely passionate about collaborating with other amazing scientists and artists who co-create a new world.
Wonderful. Bettina, would you like to go next?
Happy to. So I'm the founder, co-founder, and CEO of the LRS Art Foundation. We are an art foundation at the intersection of art and really the latest technologies and science. And we claim to be an art foundation about the future. And with that claim, with a lot of art projects that we do, sustainability, the thought about ecology and also empathy is at the core of what we do.
Wonderful. Bjørn, would you like to go next, please?
Sure. So I'm representing Superflex. Superflex is an artist that was created in 1993 by me, Rasmus and Jebb, really rejecting the idea of the genius artist, the concept of the genius artist. So we trust the collective, and therefore formed the collective body Superflex, that then today has expanded. We talk about expanded collective, moving beyond Superflex towards what we say interspecies living.
Wonderful. And Beatriz.
I'm Beatriz Colomina. I'm originally from Spain, but I've been in New York for practically all my life. I'm professor at Princeton. I direct the PhD program. And with Mark Wigley, we have curated the exhibition here across. We can already see all these things over there. It's part of the Triennale, the We the Bacteria exhibition.
Beatriz, may I start with you? You have this wonderful exhibition that you just mentioned, We the Bacteria, here this week. And I wondered whether you would like to introduce to us the idea of interspecies work.
Yes.
And how you have bacteria working with architecture. We'd love to hear more about the show, and I hope everyone will see it.
Yes, I hope you come and see it. It's actually very much about the ideas that you want to bring into the panel, because in fact we start with the idea that the human is an ecosystem, that there are trillions, hundreds of trillions actually of microbes living inside us, and that we depend on them for our survival, for our health, for our mental health. In fact, all the diseases of our time are a consequence or are related to the microbial diversity in our gut, anything from all the autoimmune disorders, the new forms of allergies, every form of cancer practically, Alzheimer's, autism, or you name it, and even mental disorders are related to the lack of diversity of our bacteria. So we are in a crucial moment in the sense that we are losing microbial diversity biodiversity at such a speed that the scientists that we had been collaborating with for the exhibition think that this is a bigger crisis to our species than climate change. So you know how in schools of architecture, and I suppose in other fields too, we are constantly thinking about climate change. This will kill us first. It's super important that we think about this loss of microbial diversity that is, of course, also amplified with the microbial resistance, which you know very well, that now kills more people in hospitals than whatever it is that they came in with. These extremophiles that live in hospitals where the most extreme protocols of cleaning are taking place. And this is a disaster, is disastrous for our bodies. And you know, of course, you already know that, right? I was in the taxi and coming here, and in the radio they were talking about how kids will eat the soil in the playground. And actually, one of the scientists we collaborate with, Martin Bleser, is the man that wrote the "Let Them Eat Dirt." This is very important. We understand it. What I don't think people understand yet is how much architecture has been from the very beginning involved. Very much responsible for the loss of microbial diversity. So we need to change the architecture we make. We need to make an architecture that is more related to the soil and that is not about killing bacteria like all the products in our household. So this is very much the exhibition.
Bjørn, if I may come to you next, I believe some of your interspecies work has been at the other end of the scale, the mammalians of the animal kingdom, including with whales. And I'd love to hear the story of Superflex and interspecies work, your recent work.
Yeah, so interspecies living, interspecies ethics, interspecies economy is, I think, much about that you also in the exhibition touched upon. For us, it began when we were invited to be expedition leader of a research ship by TBN 21 Academy in the Pacific. So we got it's one of the greatest, let's say, residencies you can have. So for 3 years, we could decide where the boat was going and why it was going somewhere. So we can invite scientists, fish behavioral experts, and so on. We decided to go to a tiny little island called Honga Tonga, that is in Tonga, that had just been erupted. It had just erupted, a volcanic eruption. So it was a little bit like trying to get to the beginning of, let's say, life on the planet. So we with scientists swam slowly on land and let ourselves delve into that space. Among others, also filming into a big lake that also then, with the camera, looked at extremophiles.
Yes.
Right? So, but the work was called deep sea minding. And you can probably guess why also. Back in those days, it was probably 18 or 19, the government of Tonga had just given permission to do deep sea mining. And that we can speak a lot about. But for us, the most important and our own transformation, really to understand the deep that we don't know so much about, was to jump in and try to learn and experience and listen to those clients, as we call them now, that are living in the sea, so that we could be able to transform our both sculpture material, but also our built environments. So we believe in that you listen, you learn, and then you cultivate. We had fish behavioral experts that pointed us towards a little tiny algae called coralline algae that coral polyps, those who built that amazing infrastructure, the coral reefs, were very attracted to. So that became, you know, a fascination then with pink. As an artist, it's quite nice if someone just gives you a color. So nature or the sea says, just use pink as a communication. And that's quite nice. It's absurd to some degree, but nevertheless, it stands out in those places where it is. So diving in, learning, cultivating, and transforming us, which it really, really did. So we, in the studio, we believe in interspecies living and that the best idea might come from a fish.
And that the important thing is to put yourself in somebody else's element, as something you've mentioned before, this idea of you've got to be invulnerable in some way with other species.
Absolutely, this is the most important, you know, for every context. I may not like to speak here, but I take that on me because it's important. Someone wants to listen, and I have to take that responsibility also. But for example, if you want to learn about the other, which we as humans in our imaginary powers can, then you of course also need to dive in. And I had my own revelation with swimming with big whales, mother and her calf, and I looked at that baby whale, and then I thought, for some reason, he looked at me, or she, and then I was turning around, and it did exactly the same. So that transformed me. And actually, I don't know exactly if that's what happened. It was documented by Francesca Habsburg in my imagination and in my story, and I'm quite sure it did happen, but it was so overwhelming that that is how I personally transformed. And then that is now that my daughter is then fan of whales, and she will be the next one jumping in, right? So.
Beautiful. Susanna, may I turn to you now? A lot of your work with Genesis 3.0 has been with organizational structures inspired by nature. So I wondered if you could bring the conversation to how we as humans and as people who run business, run organizations, can learn from nature.
Yeah, so basically, one of my main inspiration was Marcus de Sautoy's work. He's a mathematician at Oxford University, Simony Professor of Science. And I watched one of his documentaries when I was still a climate tech investor. And I was blown away why no one speaks about this guy and why in the mainstream media, if you're not a nerdy scientist. And then I started to think about how we can actually connect other designers, scientists, artists, technologists, and build a business model replicated on nature, interconnected mycelium networks, how I started to connect cultural institutions, scientists, artists for 3 years, which is a long time in venture capital sense. It's not a long time in the creative industry. And basically, I think what we really want to achieve is like having a very strong narrative, which is we're not separated from nature, we are technology, but how we can actually solve cultural institutional funding problems, how we can fund cultural productions differently, how we can make 10x investments in arts and technology, how we can change the patronage and the sort of tax write-off models in the art world, and forge collaborations, because I truly believe that without innovating and inventing new business models, many museums will be closed, fact. I think we have societal problems, climate change, and it's gonna get worse ultimately, and how we can use culture and these interconnected mycelium network of connections that we've been forging to practically solve cultural funding problems. Instead of, I tell you a concrete example so people understand what I'm talking about. Instead of creating one artwork and sell that one artwork, how one artwork can become performance, like Iris van Herpen dress can become a digital art piece, how that dress can become part of a game that Christiansen designs, and it's like this interconnected ecosystem can weave to multi-revenue streams ultimately. And it's all, whoever is studying nature and understands how nature is so interconnected and ecosystematic, I think we need to learn from this ecosystem approach, us humans, and yeah, that's the story here.
And I wondered if I could ask you, and then the rest of the panel, for concrete examples. I wonder whether, is it too much to say the blockchain is, an embodiment of the mycelium connecting trees? But if we could I'd love to hear everybody's opinion on that, or any concrete examples.
No, it's true. For instance, but concretely, if you're zooming into a DNA, or if you're zooming into a Bitcoin block or a leaf, it's the same mathematical shapes and forms connects all of us. And blockchain as a whole, I'm not going into details of the proof of stake or proof of work, but let's say proof of work is a replica of how mycelium networks are interconnected, the nodes. And so that's when I started to see, because I work with emerging technologies and blockchain and all these amazing scientists that I'm learning from, and biologists, for me it became evident to how we can shape and make the invisible visible to other people who are not biologists and scientists at Oxford University, and how we can solve cultural funding issues. No one likes to talk about it in our world. I love talking about money because I think it's so important. You know, I don't know. If you're not solving the funding of culture, we're in problems. And I think what I like about these gatherings, and I go very few speaking engagements because I like doing things. And if we do a little bit of collaboration each and every event we go and talk about how we can solve things, I think in this room probably we could solve so many things together.
Certainly. And Bettina, we were talking earlier, you mentioned a self-governing forest.
Oh, yes.
I wondered if you could share that story, because I think it's a very interesting example.
We have a project, or we nurtured a project within LAS called Terra Zero. It was one of the very first artist projects when blockchain came up, so a couple of years ago, 6-7 years ago. It's a great concept, but what we did in the past years is that we, with a group of lawyers and tax accountants, we wanted to bring this concept into reality. And the basic concept is a self-governing forest on the blockchain. We just received the green light from the German financial authority for this concept. So now we really want to plant this forest. So it's a really step-by-step approach over a couple of years. And if there's time, I just want to quickly respond also to what Susanna said. I think, as we know, there is an urgency for funding in Germany, in Europe, across the board. Within LAS, we strongly believe in artists as agents for innovation. And I think at this intersection of art and technology, there's a huge potential, not only to show that art can benefit the greater good, but actually that their artists can be entrepreneurs, artists can be innovators. And especially in Europe, there's a huge potential. There's one leading field in Europe where we are really worldwide leading, and it's the culture, it's the creative field. And I think that we need to nurture, and this potential we need to unfold, and especially at this intersection of art and technology.
100%.
Wonderful. And if we could move on to this question of empathy that we touched on. You've spoken before about the importance of how empathy can be achieved through art. And I wondered if you could maybe talk to us about some of the exhibitions you've had at LAS recently, where this has been personified.
Absolutely. I think it's at the core of nearly every project that we do. And for a very important reason. When you look here at the screen, sometimes you see an image of a garden. It's an artist project by the artist Daisy Ginsberg called Pollinator Pathmaker. And basically, it's an artwork, and at the core is an algorithm, and the algorithm designs a garden for pollinators, not for humans, which is very important, leaving this kind of human-centric perspective. And we planted this artwork in the front of the Museum of Natural History in Berlin as a start. And by the process of planting, and we did it with students in different communities, it creates empathy, because you're planting, you're nurturing this garden for pollinators, not for humans. We expanded this project as a public campaign all over the city of Berlin. We have now 20 pollinator gardens. It's the largest artwork in Berlin. And also the algorithm is extended to the United States. It becomes a global art project. The beauty of it is that the Museum of Natural History and our foundation, we also conducted a study to prove the impact of this artwork in terms of biodiversity. So to give you one example, like this artwork in front of the museum in the heart of Berlin, and it was just pure grass. We have now in the heart of Berlin over 100 bees, different species of bees, and 80% have never been there before. It's really incredible. And I also cross-pollinated other gardens in the city of Berlin and so it's an artwork. It has a real impact, and you can prove it scientifically. And to finish this off, Daisy got now a grant by the British government of over £1 million to plant now pollinator gardens / artworks in Cornwall. So this project continues in Germany, in Great Britain, hopefully in the United States, and has a real impact.
Beautiful. Beatriz, may I come back to you? We come back to environment, your métier, architecture, environment. If you'd like to tell us a little more about empathy with nature in the urban environment.
Yes, of course. I mean, even in the title of our exhibition, we have empathy now. We, the bacteria, of course, we have in our culture this incredibly antagonistic relation to bacteria. There is a big installation in the exhibition with all the arsenal, all the weapons that any Italian household, you can find them in any supermarket, used to kill bacteria, right? So this idea of killing this and killing that and killing the other thing is finally killing us. So we have to empathize with these microorganisms that we are dependent on, that have been with us for 4 billion years, and we are just a recent arrival and so stupid that we may be very well on our way out. And these microorganisms created the biosphere, created the oxygen, created the rocks in which we are living, they created the biosphere. So we have to empathize with them. Of course, architecture is all about separation. Separation from other human, separation from other species, separation from the soil, separation from this, separation from that. We are arguing precisely in a kind of manifesto in the exhibition for an architecture of entanglement with other species, precisely, but also taking account of this that we cannot even see, these very little microbes. For example, if you think about Andrés Jaque, who has this trans-species palace installation here, but he also did this little school in Madrid, for a school for little kids, right, in which he uses materials that attract birds and insects, and this is exposing little kids also to the idea that we are not against all these creatures, that we depend on them, that we collaborate with them, and so this is our position in terms of empathy. Thank you.
Beautiful. And Bjørn, if I may come to you, the question of urban spaces has been something that Superflex have worked with a lot. And I wondered whether you'd like to address that, some of your experiments in that area.
Yes, there are several paths to take on that journey. I think maybe one of the paths could be that we now talk about art as infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little bit the next level also in terms of, yes, we need to think both back in time, how art has been used throughout time, and fast forwarded to that we believe that today art is and should be in the forefront of making infrastructures at every possible level. Because in our opinion, art is life and life is art. Yeah. So it's in the social structures, it's in the hospital system, it's in actual landscape making, where art has a crucial role to play. And I think much like the human will be good also sometimes to step aside and let other species, for example, flourish and express themselves. Equally, those who have the terms of being professionals within certain fields could also step a bit aside. And then have others, and from a more artistic perspective, maybe then develop master plans for streets, for how we move, how we engage, and so on, because that is also ethics, but it's also a responsibility that we as artists also have to enforce and insist on. So for example, so that is art as infrastructure, and with that we have a big project called Super Reef. It responds to that Denmark is completely flat, so we have removed all stones from seabed. That means obviously that as we've taken all the homes away from fish and any organism in the sea, that is now when you see ocean death around Denmark. So we launched a plan, a big Gesamtkunstwerk, a big total artwork of rebuilding 55 square kilometers of stone reef. Together with citizens in Denmark. That is the expanded collective then. And we've also decided very much then to look at the child as the new urbanist. So moving towards that a child is slowly growing with change. So maybe we should, again, also flip around the power relations and start listening to their opinions on almost everything, because they have imaginary powers, like we also have, but maybe a little more motivated to also think change, and because their perspective changes with growing.
On that question of a change of perspective, Susanna, if I may come back to you, we've been discussing how nature is collaborative, networked, intelligent, and I believe that one of the things that most concerns you is how nature can provide us with a new business model, maybe, for how art can survive in the future, the art world, and I'd love to hear your take on that.
Well, it really is going back to the, for instance, I like concrete examples because sometimes I speak and in the art world people are looking at me as like I'm a little alien because I speak startup language. No, but for instance, we're working with an artist, his name is Gabriel Massan, and we have a 3-phase approach. We're funding a residency, and I'm partnered up with his galleries. So we're working with institutions and galleries, like the whole commercialization of funding art from the get-go.
Okay.
Funding the residency, doing cultural production, and we're already making sales phase 1, because instead of just Gabriel creating one statue or one piece of video, we're bringing in 6 other collaborators, taking it to fashion. We have a fashion collaboration, all biodegradable clothes, earth-friendly. We have a sand collaboration, olfactory component. We have a sound artist. So we build a whole world. That's world building for me. Brand building in marketing language, but world building in an art sense. And if you create this multi-revenue stream, really robust, beautiful worlds that also forges other artists, like a sand artist to collaborate with an olfactory artist, you create miniature worlds. And the miniature world can become also a standalone startup, and you can license the IP, which is how Hollywood makes money, the Disney model, or, you know, what I'm talking about already exists in other industries, but in the art world hasn't. And I was like, massive market gap in my language. And I think what Bettina mentioned, 100% agree, that there's an enormous potential when you start to build art and technology and science, and build these intersections that creates new outputs. And I think that's it. And of course, working with amazing Iris van Herpen to Jacob, Marcus, they're all amazing world builders, but in different industries. When you bring them together, they create an opera instead of just a song.
And I think one of the powerful things about Gabriel Massan's project as a world builder is how his determination when working with Serpentine to make smart contracts work for the entire chain of people involved in building the game. This idea of feeding the whole network, the ethos of that. And it also, I think, reminds us of how cutting-edge technology can capture so much of this. So if you think of Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst last year creating a data trust for the first time with a community of people. And if you think of Rafiq Anadol having all those school children coming to see the large nature model. And the key thing there is we have a large model looking people to empathize with nature.
He has a massive, beautiful project in Brazil, actually, where I'm living now. And with the indigenous tribe, and they raised, I think it's over $4 million, but they're building the first museum in the Amazon with indigenous people, for indigenous people. And it's amazing because it become possible with digital art. And like these nodes, how they intersect. Or another project, which is, I find it mind-blowing, how many amazing technologists are hiding in art costume operator. They invented the technology that allows choreography pieces to become digital art pieces. They couldn't find investors, they had to fund it themselves. And now the Parisian Ballet House licensing their IP, and all these nodes are interconnected. And this longevity project like Daisy's project, and it's beautiful because it can go on for years in a regenerative, never-ending manner, like the Fibonacci sequence.
Beatriz, if I would bring you in again on this idea of interconnecting nodes, if there's anything you'd like to share with us in conclusion before we go to questions, coming back to our exhibition, about what we've learned about the interconnection today of art, technology, and biodiversity.
We have learned a lot, I think, in this great conversation and also in this great exhibition. And I will return to my song that we have to learn a lot from micros, that micros actually create beautiful patterns, cities, and they do this precisely when they notice, they sense the scarcity of resources. So the opposite of humans, that we build cities and great structures when we have an abundance of resources. When they sense the scarcity, they collaborate among themselves, something that we also don't do that well, and they create these beautiful patterns that we all admire as a kind of work of art. Okay, so we should learn from the intelligence of these little creatures and apply in a way to architecture, so an architecture more collaborative, more open to other species, more entangled, as you say.
Now, I'm glad to say we have 6 minutes now for questions, and would like to open up the session to the floor. Does anyone have any questions for our 4 panelists? Please join us.
There's one.
Do we have a mic? Just coming. Thank you.
Thank you for your very insightful inputs. I was thinking, for me as an artist who works with technology, I often grapple with the problems that are embedded in using technology. And I want to pose the question to you regarding 2 things. Of course, the environmental issues that are interconnected with using technologies. We're aware now of AI and the amount of energy that uses and data servers and these kinds of things. I'm wondering how, on the one hand, you grapple with dealing with technology and the negative impact that it has on the environment, but also the political biases that are also built into technologies, everything starting from a camera to the internet to AI. How do you kind of address or deal with those particular issues in your work?
For me.
Bettina, would you like to?
Happy to. Very good questions. I think from LIS side, we want to create a platform, and we work with big tech, we work with small tech. We want to really be Switzerland in a way to create this kind of platform for discussion. And I think in terms of the energy consumption and all of this discussion, we took the stand that we say we really want to go towards innovation. We want to nurture projects like Daisies that is really about creating an impact. We have others that we nurture on LIS side. So I think for us, that's the route we took, really to go for innovation. And I think also, I've just been to a panel on the Venice Biennale just this weekend. It was an interesting discussion, very heated debate exactly about this topic. One of the key opponents was Benjamin Bratton. And but he made, even though he put wrong numbers, I think, in the presentation, he wanted to make a point that I think AI and data training is very much connected to energy, obviously, and how we, and our energy problem, especially in Europe. And we have a huge energy problem. Until we don't solve this, I think any debate around data training, AI, is very superficial, at least in my opinion.
Thank you. Bjørn, would you like
Yeah,
to?
can I add?
Oh, yeah, please, sir.
Because it's connected to why I'm in Brazil. So basically, one of the key things that we wanted to solve also, we killed one startup, by the way, that I met Bettina about. It was an NFT marketplace on Bitcoin. We couldn't solve the carbon neutral fact, and we killed it. The second one, we're working with reforestation projects and heavily personal obsession and passion. How do we globally create reforestation principles as a mandate? Because it needs to be a mandate, but how do you get there that you influence policies and influence politicians to change anything is through culture, right? And so we're working with a couple of, Sebastião Salgado, he's a friend of ours, an amazing photographer, has a beautiful nonprofit in Brazil with his wife. They reforested over 1 million trees. And the University of Sao Paulo has an amazing process. How do you reforestation at large scale? So if you connect these nodes to your cultural production, that's regenerative model also. Like, I'm not just creating exhibition for the sake of beautiful exhibition about nature. It has a cause and effect of we are funding and supporting reforestation projects, for instance.
Just a short one. I would say that every footprint that a human makes takes away resources from someone else, from nature. Also, any artistic expression that you choose, being it a data-driven, a sculpture taking virgin material out, and so on and so forth. So, as an artistic expression, you are also to consider what you're doing, why you're doing it, the consequences of your actions, also into the context you're presenting your work. So, it's a whole stream of considerations by each individual, from an artistic perspective, from every one of us in here, coming here, going here, and so on and so on. So I think, but you should not be necessarily stopped, but you should consider much of these in your expressions as an artist or scientist or wherever you might be, right?
Exactly, we all have to make choices, right? I mean, we were all or many of us were in the Biennale of Venice. Where is everybody coming from? A huge crowd of people coming from all over the world, and we are talking about zero impact. No, it's a huge impact, right? So every time we go to a place, every time we take a plane, every time. So these are not just related to art and technology, but the entire decisions that we make on an everyday basis. I was very struck, I must say, by a panel that I saw yesterday in the exhibition of Norman Foster downstairs that puts the number of deaths by different kinds of energy. And it's extraordinary because you see this amount of death from coal, this amount of death from gas, this amount of, and then you go to nuclear, it's like almost nothing. So reconsidering nuclear energy, which I know it has a terrible reputation since the 70s, since the great disaster, but we need to reconsider it in this moment.
That's a wonderfully integrated question and discussion to end on this topic. And so I would like to thank Bettina, Susanna, Bjørn, and Beatriz very much.